We're back with breaking news out of Virginia, where Attorney General Pam Bondi just confirmed the FBI executed a search warrant at the home of a Washington Post journalist. Bondi says the journalist was, quote, obtaining and reporting classified and illegally leaked information from the Pentagon contractor, who she adds is currently behind bars. Hannah Natanson, who covers the federal workforce, was at her home when this search was executed. The Post says she has been part of the publication's most high-profile and sensitive coverage during the first year of the second Trump administration. Lisa, what do you make of Bondi's comments on this investigation, this search warrant? Just how unusual is all of this?
Well, it's incredibly unusual. Let's start with the fact that in April of last year, Pam Bondi rescinded a Department of Justice policy that was promulgated by then Attorney General Merrick Garland during the Biden administration.
But let's switch gears a bit, because I want to discuss something that I honestly think is one of the most concerning and constitutionally alarming events of the Trump presidency. There are formal impeachment articles filed in the United States House of Representatives, and they specifically accuse the president of using his powers and platform to incite violence against members of Congress and to threaten the independence of the federal judiciary. These aren't just vague political slingshots being thrown around on cable news. We're talking about official constitutional documents that lay out in disturbing detail a pattern of behavior that suggests a severe abuse of presidential power, one that some lawmakers claim is so dangerous it calls for his removal from office through impeachment. On December 10th, 2025, Representative Al Green from Texas officially filed House Resolution 939 to impeach Donald Trump. The language in that resolution, along with the allegations and presidential statements it highlights, is genuinely shocking, even by the extraordinary standards we've seen during this presidency, which has stretched the limits of what's deemed acceptable presidential talk further than any other administration in recent history.
And in place of that policy, she put in a new policy to make it easier for the Department of Justice to conduct searches of journalists' home and offices when the Department of Justice is conducting a leak investigation. She essentially said that this Department of Justice would not tolerate the leaks of classified information.
So they were able to, DOJ, get the search warrant because they put in the warrant affidavit that this reporter, in her home, in her devices, her phone and laptop, there's evidence of a crime that was committed. That's how the search warrant was able to be obtained by the federal magistrate. And this tweet makes it clear that she is being accused.
There's an impeachment resolution with two main articles against Trump. The first article accuses him of inciting violence against Congress members by calling for the execution of 6 sitting Democratic lawmakers who have military or intelligence backgrounds. It's crucial to pay attention to the specific wording used here. According to the resolution, Trump posted on social media that the actions of these named Democratic representatives were seditious and deserving of death. He even shared a message that said, "Hang them, George Washington would." So here we have the President of the United States publicly calling for the execution of current Congress members, claiming that their political conduct amounts to a capital offense. He amplified a call for them to be hanged, and that's what he put out for millions of his followers to see and possibly act on. The second article of impeachment accuses Trump of misusing presidential power to intimidate, which adds another layer to this intense situation. So here's the scoop. There's been some serious chatter about how Trump's comments threaten the independence of the federal judiciary. Kind of a big deal. This branch of government is supposed to keep the executive and legislative branches in check, so it's crucial for it to function independently. The resolution making the rounds points to Trump's repeated threats and what they describe as some pretty nasty comments directed at federal judges. They are not just your run-of-the-mill criticism. We're talking about language that leans into personal intimidation and hints at retaliation against those judges who might not rule in his favor. Now, here's the kicker. Reports indicate that around 1/3 of the entire federal judiciary has received threats. And each time Trump launches into his abusive rhetoric about judges, those threats shoot up dramatically. It's like clockwork. His public comments targeting specific judges lead to a flood of threatening messages from the public. And that's a documented cause and effect relationship right there. We're not just hearing this from a random politician. Even Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson of the United States Supreme Court has sounded the alarm about threats against the judiciary. She's raised concerns that this level of intimidation is seriously undermining the rule of law. For a sitting Supreme Court justice to say that reveals just how crucial this issue is. It's threatening the judicial branch's ability to act independently and perform its constitutional duty of overseeing government power. When you have a Supreme Court justice warning us that threats against judges are endangering the rule of law, and formal impeachment articles are backing that up, documenting how these threats spike right after the president's statements, we're staring down a real constitutional crisis. This involves someone who holds the most powerful position in the country, potentially using his voice to jeopardize the safety and independence of an entire branch of our government. The impeachment resolution doesn't hold back in its language either. It describes Trump in no uncertain terms, calling him, and it's really something, how President Trump has used his power in ways that raise serious concerns. If he stays in office, he could keep pushing violence, fostering hate, and eroding our democracy. Let's take a closer look at the two articles of impeachment because what they reveal about his conduct is truly remarkable. When we peel back the layers, we see a troubling pattern that ties into a larger crisis regarding Trump's ongoing attacks on the judiciary. This situation poses a significant threat to our constitutional democracy, far beyond just a few policy disputes or outlandish comments. Now, Article 1 of the impeachment focuses on Trump's alarming public calls for violence against specific members of Congress. The basis for these claims is all grounded in Trump's own social media posts, which are out there for anyone to see. No hiding here. According to the impeachment resolution, he named 6 Democratic officials, all of whom have military or intelligence backgrounds. These individuals have served the country in various ways before stepping into elected roles. In a shocking twist, Trump claimed their actions were, to quote the resolution directly, seditious behavior punishable by death. He even promoted a different post that said, "Hang them," George Washington would clearly suggesting hanging those members of Congress. Just think about that for a moment. It's quite a spectacle to see a sitting president publicly calling for the execution of members of another branch of government. It's so extreme that it might slip through the cracks amidst the never-ending chaos that seems to follow Trump. But it's important to recognize how unprecedented this behavior is. There's simply no historic parallel for a president making such dire threats against lawmakers. In a stunning turn of events, a president has declared that specific members of Congress should be executed for how they conduct their political affairs. It's truly hard to believe it's come to this. Throughout the entire history of the United States, even during our most tumultuous times, no president has ever openly called for the death of named lawmakers. This impeachment resolution isn't just about poor presidential behavior. It argues that these statements provoke violence, putting the lives and physical safety of those targeted at serious risk. When someone as influential as Trump shares these views with millions of followers, many of whom have shown a willingness to act out on his words, we have a dangerous situation where some might see this as a green light to commit violence against those named. There's a serious implication when he says certain members deserve such extreme punishment for what he calls seditious acts. Then we shift gears from Congress to the courts, and it gets just as alarming. The resolution outlines a deliberate campaign of intimidation directed at federal judges who rule against the Trump administration. It points to his repeated threats and harsh remarks aimed at judges, including insults directed at them by name on social media. This behavior raises questions about their competence, accuses them of bias, and even calls for their impeachment and removal. The resolution posits that these statements are meant to intimidate judges into making favorable rulings out of fear for their safety and careers. And it's not just loose talk. The resolution brings to light actual consequences stemming from Trump's rhetoric. Reports indicate that about 1/3 of all federal judges in the country have faced threats, a startling statistic that underscores the hostile environment cultivated by these comments. The resolution makes a clear link between Trump's statements and the looming threat faced by judges, highlighting the seriousness of the situation. Each time Trump targets a specific judge or throws around abusive comments about the judiciary, there's a noticeable spike in threats against those judges. It's actually pretty crucial to understand this connection because it takes Trump's harsh words from being just unpleasant political talk to something much more serious, both legally and constitutionally. If an everyday person were to post on social media suggesting that judges ought to face consequences for their decisions, and there was a rise in threats towards those judges, that person could face criminal charges for incitement or intimidation. But when the president, the most powerful figure in the country, does the same thing, it carries even heavier constitutional implications. The president has a special responsibility to protect the independence of the different branches of government instead of undermining or threatening them. It goes beyond just individual judges facing threats, which is already pretty alarming. This is about the broader issue of judicial independence as a fundamental principle. Federal judges have lifetime appointments for a reason, to make decisions based on the law and the Constitution without the fear of political backlash. That independence is truly the bedrock of the American legal system. It's what enables the rule of law to function effectively, differentiating a constitutional democracy from an authoritarian regime where judges bend to the will of a leader rather than adhere to legal standards. When the president consistently and harshly criticizes judges who rule against him, and these criticisms lead to a rise in threats, it creates an intimidating environment that threatens judicial independence. Even if no judge outright changes a ruling because of intimidation, the very existence of that threat, the understanding that ruling against the president may bring personal attacks from such a powerful figure, followed by a deluge of frightening communications from his supporters, creates a chilling effect on judicial independence. So, there's this impeachment resolution called House Resolution 537, and it really dives into Trump's actions regarding the judiciary. It not only highlights his public calls for attacking judges verbally, but it also points out his push to actually impeach and remove federal judges who make rulings he doesn't like. This resolution is quite alarming because it frames Trump's demands for judicial impeachment as part of a broader authoritarian approach. It suggests that he sees constitutional checks on his power as obstacles to bulldoze over instead of boundaries to respect. What's particularly concerning is how he's trying to turn impeachment power into a weapon. When a president suggests impeaching judges who disagree with him, and his party starts holding hearings on that very topic, it sends a clear, chilling message to federal judges. Go against him, and your career might be in jeopardy. It's a direct threat backed by the powerful position he holds and the potential for congressional action from his supporters. And it really undermines judicial independence. Now, tying this back to Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, she's raised some serious concerns about how these threats impact the judiciary and the rule of law. When a sitting Supreme Court justice speaks out about attacks on the judiciary, it's a major warning that we can't ignore. Jackson's comments reflect what many legal experts have been saying for years. The constant barrage of attacks on the judiciary from the president, along with growing threats against judges, is creating a dangerous environment that puts at risk the judge's ability to serve as an independent check on government power and fulfill their constitutional role. So here's the deal. A justice whose job is to interpret and uphold the Constitution has come out and said that the rule of law is seriously threatened by attacks on judges. And when the impeachment articles nail down that these threats directly stem from the president's own words, it's clear we're not just talking about some hypothetical situation. This crisis is unfolding right in front of us. Let's break it down into 3 key points that really stand out. First, it's important to recognize that we're in some pretty historic territory here. A sitting president has openly called for the execution of specific members of Congress, and this has been documented in official impeachment articles. It doesn't really matter if these articles make it to a vote in Congress. What matters is that there's now an official record. That record shows that the president labeled the actions of certain lawmakers as treasonous, punishable by death, and even backed messages suggesting they should be hanged. This documentation isn't going anywhere. It will forever be part of the congressional archives. It shows there's a solid argument that the president's speech has moved past what we typically consider protected political commentary and into the realm of inciting violence against another branch of government. Down the line, future Congresses could pick up and build on these articles, using them as evidence of ongoing presidential misconduct. And historians will point to this as a moment when presidential rhetoric really hit a low point. Now, on to the second takeaway. The impressive link between Trump's attacks on judges and the alarming rise in threats against federal judges isn't just political drama. It signals a real constitutional crisis. The independence of our federal judiciary isn't a matter of politics or preferences. It's a basic requirement for our form of governance. Without it, our whole system of separated powers and checks and balances just falls apart. When about 1/3 of federal judges are facing threats, it raises serious concerns about the integrity of our legal system. It's really something how the president's words seem to create this atmosphere of fear around the judiciary. Each time he makes a public remark targeting judges, the threats towards them and their families ramp up noticeably. It's quite troubling because this kind of environment can absolutely undermine the independence of judges. When those in the judiciary are aware that a ruling against the president could lead to threats against their loved ones, they can't truly act independently, even with the best intentions of sticking to the law. Just the existence of such a threat makes it hard to maintain that judicial independence, regardless of whether a particular ruling is swayed directly. Now, what's interesting about these impeachment articles is how they officially lay out this situation and pin it on the president's own words. It's like they're documenting that he's creating the very environment that's compromising the safety and independence of the federal judiciary. These articles carry a weight that's distinct from the previous impeachment attempts we've seen. They don't just touch on policy disagreements or instances of alleged corruption, but rather focus on how the president is attacking the fundamental framework of American democracy itself. Previous impeachment efforts pointed to specific actions like hiding information related to the Epstein case, carrying out unauthorized military missions, or using the Justice Department for personal gain. All of those are serious accusations showing misuse of power. But the articles filed by Green highlight something even more critical: the president's ongoing campaign to intimidate and undermine the very institutions meant to hold him accountable. For instance, calling for the execution of Congress members directly threatens the safety and independence of the legislative branch. Similarly, targeting and threatening judges attacks the judicial branch's independence. Altogether, this makes for a thorough onslaught against the two branches of government that the Constitution specifically granted powers to limit presidential authority. These articles suggest that this isn't just some accidental occurrence. It's a calculated and systematic attack. What's important to realize here is that these impeachment articles aren't just about a president making some outrageous comments online. They're pointing to a much deeper issue. We've got a president who wields a colossal amount of power through his platform, and that's creating a climate of fear and intimidation. It's not just about uncomfortable tweets. It's putting members of Congress and federal judges in real danger, and it's chipping away at the independence of our government branches. The Constitution was designed precisely to stop this kind of unrestrained executive power. There's solid evidence showing the threats out there and how they connect back to what the president says. The damage to judicial independence is documented too, and now all of this is part of the permanent congressional record. It creates a groundwork for accountability moving forward. When a president suggests that specific lawmakers should face execution and judges are hit with a barrage of threats every time he criticizes them, we've moved beyond mere improperi in rhetoric. Now, the real question is whether our institutions can withstand this pressure. Can they check, and if need be, remove a president who is actively undermining the core principles of our constitutional governance? These impeachment articles are a response to that pressing question, but whether they're enough remains to be seen. The crucial issue now is whether American democracy can protect itself from an ongoing presidential attack on its independence and safety. It's a defining moment in our history, and it's worth keeping a close watch on what unfolds. I'll catch you next